In this lecture, we will learn about the history of the slogan, "The personal is political," and understand its meanings and interpretations. Until now, the discussion regarding power, privilege, and oppression has happened in the context of a public space. However, the personal space is not devoid of the operation of these forces. The personal or private space of the home can be just as much as a site for the interplay of power and politics as the public space is. It is contended that the family as a microcosm reflects the macrocosm of the larger society. The structures of the family and society both symbiotically form and inform each other. An analysis of this relationship allows, in the words of Crenshaw, the recognizing as social and systemic what was formerly perceived as isolated and individual. What is the history of this slogan? And where did the phrase "personal is political" come from? Popularized in the late 1960s and 1970s, it was ubiquitously used by feminists of the time, particularly by radical feminists, student activists, and black feminists like Crenshaw, Lord, and the Combahee River Collective. Carol Hanish's essay from 1969 titled "The Personal is Political," after it was written, argued about the intrinsically oppressive and patriarchal political structures that function in private spaces to restrict women's agency and access. Hanish defines the scope of the political as any relationship with a deep-rooted power dynamic. The essay was a response to the prevalent sex role theory, which assumed that biological sex intrinsically determines the nature of an individual, based on which they must be assigned special roles, for which they are conditioned or prepared. The essay also refuted the long-standing belief that women were responsible for their own oppression since they were hysterical, weak, emotional, or indecisive. This highlights the gaslighting women experience when their problems are dismissed as being all in their head. Hanish later added the significance of financial independence for women upon revisiting the essay in 2006. Moreover, the essay also attempted to rally women into political action. The phrase "personal is political" was further popularized by the Red Stockings, a San Francisco-based feminist organization that was crucial to the women's liberation movement. For the first time, the concept of politics became impressionistic. Politics was thus reconstructed since it always has a subtext of social power. The axis shifted to the fundamental political nature of interactions in the daily life. Here, the term political has several layers of meanings. It includes personal acts of resistance. The definition also connotes that considering that particular issue as non-political might cause harm. It also demands attention and a means to reconfigure understandings of oppression from those involved in the political system. Feminists rallied that the personal problems women faced at home, like the disproportionate burden of labor, lack of access to sexual and reproductive health care, and various forms of domestic violence, were not isolated incidents but a collective epidemic that traumatized women, and that they proposed that these were equally relevant political issues. It was asserted that the oppression of women in the home was a result of patriarchal gender politics, and their relegation as the individual private laments of women served to marginalize them. Several feminist authors discuss the subject of marginalization of women in the private sphere. Carol Pateman, in her essay, "The Fraternal Social Contract," proposes that the political or public is considered patriarchal in nature, whereas the private is considered womanly. Kate Millett's "Sexual Politics," which became a seminal work in feminist theory, also reflected on the power imbalance caused by patriarchal power. Millett further added that the power imbalance was reinforced politically and culturally, and the structure of the traditional family had to be undone in order to effect change. Renee Herberle offers that the personal always has a ready political potential, and it is essential to transgress the boundaries of male political thought. By advocating space for women's personal issues in the political domain, women were recast as independent thinking beings. This necessitated collective action to yield collective solutions through political activism. The phrase personal is political was also inspired by the act of women sharing their personal experiences in the household. American activist Kathy Sarah Child first used the term consciousness raising to denote the rebellious convening of women in small groups to explore the political aspects of their personal life, breaking the unwritten rule of sharing private matters of oppression in the home in public as a way to seek community care and solidarity. In particular, for black women, according to the 1977 Combahee River Collective Statement, consciousness raising went beyond white women's revelations in dealing with the implications of race and class as well as sex, delving deep into the cultural and experiential nature of black women's oppression out of necessity because their multi-layered texture was never examined before. The hierarchy of political as superior to the personal is thus broken as the critical gaze turned inward. By analyzing the layers of oppression they experience, black women dispelled the myth of universal feminism. These politics emerged from the identity and lived experiences of black women who found themselves at the bottom, which was not conducive to their struggles. It was considered the most profound. As we saw, the slogan, "The personal is political," has a rich, complex history within feminist discourse from the 1960s and 1970s and was based on a few central ideas. Number one, that the home can be a site of oppression for women where their agency is removed. Number two, that this oppression is shared but differentiated and compounded based on the identities and experience of different communities. Number three, that the depoliticization, by relegating it to the personal sphere of this oppression, serves to marginalize women. And lastly, that politicizing this personal oppression was a key to challenging it. I hope that this lecture helped you understand the history of the slogan, "The personal is political," better. In the next lecture of this module, we will talk about the process of finding, learning about, reflecting on, and sustainably practicing our own personal politics and politicizing our personal lives.